I was sitting on my boat, sipping coffee and watching the ducks glide across the lake my grandfather left me when I noticed the glaring orange eviction notice slapped onto the hull. It was signed by the local homeowners association, the very same HOA that rents the lake from me. For a moment, I thought it had to be some sort of bad joke. The level of absurdity was that thick. My boat hadn't violated a single rule. This was my lake, my dock, my family's property for 3 generations. The water rights had been legally signed over to me when I was 24. Yet there I was, staring at a piece of paper threatening daily fines unless I removed what they described as an unsightly, non-conforming watercraft obstructing the community's visual enjoyment. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. They hadn't just picked the wrong fight, they'd picked the wrong war. As I walked up the hill toward my house, the one that overlooks the lake and has stood for 3 generations, I spotted Karen standing at the edge of my dock like she owned the place. Clipboard in hand, visor perched perfectly on top of her oversprayed hair, and that same sour expression she always wore whenever the local teenagers forgot to roll their trash bins back in time. I hadn't even stepped off the gravel path before she began waving that clipboard like it was some kind of royal decree. "You need to move your boat," she announced, as though she hadn't just stepped onto private property. "It violates HOA Ordinance 3B, Section 12. Unsightly objects on community lake shores." I smiled, not because it was funny anymore, but because I knew she had no idea what she was walking into. Karen and her suburban council of clipboard tyrants had no clue they were tenants here. They had no idea that their lease came with terms, or that they were a guest on my lake. They also didn't know that picking a fight with me would lead to their precious HOA summer picnic crashing harder than a drone into a goose flock. I gave her the polite nod she was expecting, playing the role of the obedient homeowner. "I'll look into it," I told her. But I already knew this was about to get fun. Back inside the house, I pulled out the old deed folder from my father's safe. Sure enough, notarized signatures from 1984 made it clear the lake was mine, including the shoreline and all usage rights. The lease agreement was airtight, with one particularly juicy clause: if the HOA ever tried to restrict my rightful use of the lake, the lease could be voided immediately. The very next morning, Karen escalated. HOA security strolled by and slapped another notice on the dock. This one included photos of my boat anchored exactly where it had been for over a decade without issue. But suddenly, thanks to Karen's self-importance, my boat was now the eyesore of the neighborhood. Karen's emails to the HOA members started ramping up. She framed the entire thing as me being defiant, an unreasonable rogue resident threatening the community's harmony. She claimed the lake was HOA common property and I was trying to illegally privatize it. That's when I started printing copies of the lease, the deed, the historical water access agreements, all of it neatly organized in a binder I titled Operation Wake Up Call. One afternoon, while grabbing my mail, Karen cornered me at the mailboxes. She leaned in like we were about to exchange CIA-level intel. "This can be resolved quickly," she whispered. "Just move the boat and we can let this go." She really thought she was doing me a favor. Like her little HOA empire had divine rights over my family's property. I smiled, nodded, and promised to think about it. Meanwhile, I was already emailing my lawyer, Charles. 2 days later, a couple of board members knocked on my door, not Karen, but the quieter ones, the ones who follow orders but don't usually pick the fights themselves. They were polite, apologetic even. They suggested there had been a miscommunication and that the initial letter might have been a little aggressive. I offered them lemonade and let them sit on my porch. I listened without interruption as they spun their side of the story. Then I slid the binder across the table. Deed, lease, clauses, and the big one, the HOA's privileges, not power, and my right to terminate the lease on breach. Their faces fell. They left quietly. By the end of the week, word leaked from the board's group chat. Karen was fuming. She called me a lake squatter and swore she'd get the sheriff involved. The sheriff, bless him, happens to be my fishing buddy. Karen didn't know that, and I wasn't about to tell her. I wanted her to keep going, to bury herself so deep that, when this finally hit, she wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Karen started organizing a big HOA summer picnic. Flyers went out, chairs were rented, catering booked. All scheduled to take place right on the shoreline of the lake. She never asked for permission. She just assumed she had it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood on my dock one evening, watching Karen pace the property line with a measuring wheel, muttering to herself. What she didn't know was that I had cameras installed under the dock recording everything in crisp 4K. I brewed my coffee a little stronger the next morning and made my way to the county archives. The clerk smiled as soon as I mentioned my last name. She disappeared into the back and returned with a folder thick with dusty paperwork, the original deed, the water rights agreements, and the lease contract spelling out exactly what I needed. Charles practically grinned when I laid the documents on his desk. Terminate now or wait for her to hang herself? We wait, I told him. Let her hand me the win. Karen kept going. She planted laminated signs along the walking paths, declaring no unauthorized personal vessels beyond this point. She stuck little flags along the shore, printed fake permit numbers on them, and sent another community-wide email about overcrowding from unauthorized use. Neighbors laughed. They forwarded me the emails with smiley faces and gifs. But I didn't respond. I just documented everything. Karen doubled down. She organized a pop-up lemonade stand and turned it into a soapbox railing about visual harmony and rogue residents undermining community integrity. I just waved and smiled as I cruised past in my boat. Then came her final mistake. The event flyer went out. HOA summer picnic. Food, music, games, family fun on the lakefront. No mention of permission. No acknowledgement of ownership. Perfect. The morning of the picnic was flawless. Not a cloud in the sky. Karen, clipboard in hand, buzzed around giving orders. Tables lined the shore, tents popped up, a giant inflatable slide half-submerged in the lake. I sat offshore, watching it all unfold from my boat, Bluetooth speaker at the ready. At noon sharp, Karen grabbed the mic to welcome everyone. She smiled. She praised the spirit of the community. And just as she introduced, the band me speaker kicked on. Attention HOA board and guests, my recorded voice echoed over the crowd. The lake and shoreline currently being used for this event are privately owned and leased. Unauthorized use of this land is a direct violation of Lease Clause 9.3. Immediate termination of lease rights may occur. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen froze, her hand halfway in the air. Please refer to the documentation now being distributed, my voice continued. Right on cue, I piloted my small dinghy to the shore, handing out packets copies of the deed, the lease, every clause highlighted. Karen's face flushed crimson. She grabbed a packet, scanning frantically, looking for some loophole that wasn't there. Guests backed away from tables. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Karen grabbed the mic and shrieked about fraudulent documents and personal vendettas. Her voice cracking, eyes darting at the board, but the board didn't defend her. They stood there, silent, shuffling their feet. Finally, one of the board members stepped up, apologized to the crowd, and shut the event down. Karen stormed off, humiliated. The next week, the board called a special meeting. Karen sat slumped in a corner chair as Charles and I laid out every violation, every false fine, every unauthorized action. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Karen was removed as HOA president. I delayed the lease termination, gave them a chance to clean up their act. But I made it clear, no more threats, no more signs, no more Karen. Weeks passed. Karen vanished from the walking trails. No more clipboard parades. Neighbors started talking again, casually, warmly. For the first time in years, the lake felt peaceful. I put up a new sign at the shoreline, private property. Access by owner, invitation only. No speeches. No grandstanding. Just quiet closure. One evening, Karen showed up at the edge of the path. No clipboard, no shades. Just a basket of muffins, a jar of jam, and a folded note. I came to apologize, she said softly. I didn't invite her in. I didn't need to. But I accepted the basket not as forgiveness, but as an ending. The HOA signed a new lease. Higher rent, stricter rules, crystal clear boundaries. The brass plaque mounted by the dock now reads, in appreciation of the landowners who preserve this lake for all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back, it's just standing your ground and letting the truth do the work for you.